Good morning, everybody. Hope you slept well. I'm sitting down here with the dog. Just got myself together. Just had a little bit of a breakfast with my morning supplements, and I'm ready to head out the door. I figured I'd do this video real quick before I leave. There were some questions about Valvoline fluid yesterday on my transmission service video. My 6R80, the one I added a dipstick to, and I used the dipstick to service it. There were a couple people saying, do you like Valvoline better than Ford? And I do. I do like the Valvoline fluid better than the Ford fluid. And the simple fact is it just seems to run better. The transmission seems to shift a lot smoother and stuff with the Valvoline fluid. You have to understand that these companies, whenever they give you a transmission fluid, it has to be rated for what that manufacturer calls for or exceed it. And a lot of times these fluids exceed the manufacturer's fluid because the manufacturer, they put out the minimum quality fluid for that vehicle. You know, it's the minimum to get that vehicle through warranty, to keep it healthy. And if you change it often, no problem. But I want better than just the minimum. So I used Valvoline transmission fluid. It's my favorite transmission fluid. The Red Bottle Max Life technology can be used in all different types of applications, and so can the other one, the new extended protection one that I used. You just have to do a little bit of research on it. Actually, pick up the phone and call up Valvoline customer service, and they will answer your questions. As a tech working at the Ford dealer, I was putting in the Red Max Life technology in the 6R80s, the 10R80s. I was putting it in everything because it's a multi-line, multi-vehicle fluid. The way they chemically engineer it, it can do what needs to be done, no problem at all. I called up Valvoline and I asked them, is it okay for me to use this Max Life technology in the ULV vehicles as well? From like 2017 up, they started sticking it in the 3.5 EcoBoost platform, got a 10-speed, but the other line didn't. None of the other trucks did. And so did some of the other SUVs in 2018 with Ford. They ended up going with ULV as well. So I called them up and I actually asked them, can I use the Red Bottle Max Life technology? And they were like, absolutely. We don't know of a vehicle that you really can't put it in, because they're putting it in Hondas and they're putting it in all kinds of stuff, especially Hondas. Hondas were having shifting problems, you know, once they get 70, 80,000 miles, 100,000 miles on their fluid. And people were starting to do mini flushes. They would flush as much as they could out of the transmission, and then they dump that Max Life technology in there, and they'd be like, man, my transmission's shifting so much better with this Max Life technology. It's running cooler, it's running, you know, it's just overall, that's what you would hear. Now, what I did at 35,000 miles, well, let me backtrack a little bit. I bought the truck at like 78, 79,000 miles. At 80,000 miles, I changed the transmission filter inside the pan, and then I also changed the fluid that was in the pan, which was about 5 quarts. And I put everything together. Been driving the vehicle for 35,000 miles, no problem at all. No shifting issues, no anything. Transmission fluid still cherry red, barely any discoloration to it. And this time, what I did was I just serviced the pan fluid only. The reason is those filters last a very long time inside those transmissions. And if you're not having transmission failure, you don't need to service the transmission filter every single time you service the fluid. You can let it go an additional run. So I changed it at 80,000, ran it 35,000 miles, changed the fluid this time. I'm going to run it another 35, 40,000 miles. Then I'm going to change the filter and the fluid again. And the reason I'm answering this right now is because there was a fellow that left a pretty disgruntled comment, it looked like, on the channel. And now I'm trying not to personalize everything here. I'm a human being as well. Whenever you guys say negative things to me, it makes me want to say negative things back to you. So I'm going to take a pause here. I'm not going to say anything negative. I'm going to post the gentleman's comment up. This was on the last transmission video that I had, so you guys can see for yourself. I did very clearly explain this in the other video. I said I serviced this vehicle at 80,000 miles. I've put about 35 to 40,000 miles on this fluid. The filter doesn't need to be changed again, but the fluid does. I don't beat or rag this thing, so there's no reason for me to change this. I don't see anything in the fluid discoloration that would indicate that the filter's not doing its job anymore, so I'm only going to do a pan service, which is about 5 quarts. Here's the comment. If you have old dirty fluid in your trans and you put a new filter on and run the fluid through that filter, even for 20 seconds, that filter is now contaminated. Why would you put new clean fluid through it? You're just compromising the new fluid, not trying to sound like an arsehole or tell you your business, but to me, new oil, new filter. I had explained those filters, Ford literally rates them for a lifetime or 150,000 miles. They literally tell people not to service the transmission in a 6R80 or 10R80. And there's a dude at work with 190,000 miles on his truck. He's never serviced the transmission fluid or the filter in the vehicle. Yes, his transmission is going to fail before mine, but he also doesn't beat this thing. That filter and that fluid has been in that vehicle since he bought it brand new. It's got 192,000 miles on it. I'm not going to do that to my truck. So that filter doesn't need to be changed all the time. That filter doesn't need to be changed every time you freshen up the fluid some. That's not how this works, and I clearly explained it in that video. So I hope you guys understand, if you're servicing the fluid in your transmission, you don't have to change the filter every single time. And there's many transmissions where you can't change the filter. It's built into the transmission. In order to change the filter, you got to pull the thing apart, so you can only service the fluid. There's nothing wrong with only servicing the fluid in your transmission and not the filter. Just make sure the next time you service the transmission, or you don't let it go super, super long in between your interval, then you service the filter. Nothing wrong with that. The only way that I would be servicing the filter every time I do the fluid is if I was going a super long drain interval, or I was neglecting the vehicle. I don't do that. So I hope this clears up why you would change the filter, why you would change the fluid, and vice versa. And this is my personal service interval and how I feel that I see these trucks work best and they last the longest. I don't change the filter every single time I change the fluid. There's no reason for that, especially when the transmission is very healthy. You can do whatever you want. You can do whatever what you see fit. I'm gonna do what I see fit and what I know works, and I'm gonna apply my over 20 years in the field, and I'm gonna let that speak for itself. So why would you not want to service the transmission? Why would you not want to service the fluid and the filter, or vice versa, or whatever? Well, if you have a super neglected, severely neglected like transmission, and it's just shifting weird and everything else, and you go to flush all that old fluid out of there, you're going to flush the contaminants that are in that fluid, the grit and stuff like that, that help that thing at least somewhat shift. You flush all that out of there and you put a bunch of new fluid in there, and that material and stuff is gone. Well, now this thing's going to have even more problems than what it did before. So if the transmission's already acting up and it's shifting weird and it doesn't seem like a torque converter problem, sometimes you can flush the transmission enough to get the torque converter cleaned out. But if it's a valve body problem, or if it's a clutch problem or something like that, or your frictions are wore out in your transmission, you're pretty much on borrowed time anyway. So servicing the fluid and the filter is more than likely not going to fix your problem. Now, what are some symptoms of like a plugged filter? In the morning when you start the vehicle, you have to let the vehicle warm up completely or it won't shift into gear. Chances are that filter's plugged up so much and that fluid is so cold it can't make it through that filter in order to apply what you want to do, which is the drive gear, that you have to let it warm up enough so that fluid can start getting through that blockage. That's one of the main symptoms of a plugged filter. Also, could be delayed shifts, harsh shifts. There's another scenario to look at as well. Transmission seems excessively noisy. That's not normal. You've got a feel for the vehicle. That could also be a sign of a plugged transmission filter. If you're noticing your trans temperatures are constantly creeping up higher than they normally would, or getting to the point where it's overheating, that could also be a symptom of either bad fluid or fluid that's wore out, or a plugged up filter as well, because it can't flow properly. So these are some things to look at. This is just specifically a transmission fluid video, And that's all I got for right now. I think I've said enough. If you guys have any more questions, please let me know. I really do love the Valvoline MaxLife technology and the Valvoline Extended Protection Fluid for my transmission in all my vehicles. And that's just kind of what I stick with. But again, potato, potato. You guys figure out what works for you. I'm going to figure out what works for me, and I'm going to try to help as many people as I possibly can. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening this morning. Sorry for the long-winded video. Hope you guys have a great day. Be blessed.